Former senior official at the Department of Homeland Security and Republican strategist James Norton. Hi James, thanks for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Why is this important?
Well, I think that one thing to remember is that governing in Washington is very much a marathon and not a sprint. And I think in the early couple of weeks here in the Trump administration that it's been a little bit challenging at times for the administration to kind of get its feet under it. I think that you're trying to get his cabinet in place, get some officials in place, and the issue with General Flynn certainly is unfortunate in terms of his resignation and what happened. Buzzards were certainly circling here in Washington in the last couple of days, and I think his resignation is essentially a result of him becoming a distraction essentially for the White House and needing to move on.
It seems like it was a schoolboy error for, amongst other things, he didn't realise that a conversation that he was having with the Russians would have been recorded. Is it down to a gung-ho approach that we have seen from some of the Trump administration? And he isn't a politician, so he doesn't know the rules, and he's paying a heavy price.
Well, I think oftentimes, the transition from the campaign world into the governing world is certainly a different pace and has different structure and different rules to it. And I think oftentimes you're bringing together a collection of people that work on a campaign that maybe haven't worked together in government. The Trump administration may be unique in the sense that you're dealing with a lot of people that haven't been in government before. Although General Flynn has served in previous capacities in the government in that kind of place. I think that President Trump is still working to get his footing. I think he's still putting his people in place. I think that he's continued to move forward. He'll be meeting with the Israeli Prime Minister, not today, tomorrow. He met with the Canadian Prime Minister yesterday. And so I think some of these staff level issues certainly are a distraction, but I think he can get beyond them, especially with the resignation.
Yeah, as far as President Trump is concerned, I mean, it's not been an easy few weeks for him, the transition from being the next president-elect to actually being the president. What impact will this have on his administration? I mean, he's still not filled some of the roles that he needs to.
Yeah, no, I think had he not resigned today, I think it would have had a longer-term effect in terms of legislation that he's going to need to get done. He wants to do health care reform, tax reform. He certainly wants to retool the Defense Department. He's looking to spend more money on some things, overseas and here domestically. So I think those things can be a drag on the Hill. Even Senator Blunt came out today, a member of the Republican Party, who said that he wanted some more information on Russians and things that were happening in relationships with the administration. So I think those things certainly signal potential rough waters. I mean, they are manageable, but I think him needing to move on from certain staff is probably the right way to go and kind of rebalance the administration. I think we've seen this from other administrations. National Security Advisor Jim Jones didn't last very long with President Obama. There were some internal issues there. And so I don't think it's the first time we've seen staff make an early departure from administration, but I think it's how does the administration then adjust. President Clinton had to bring in a Republican communications director, David Gergen, to reset his communications in the early days when George Stephanopoulos wasn't working out as the press secretary. So there are some things that can happen in the short term, but that's why I say it's really a marathon and not a sprint here in Washington and trying to lay out your agenda.
Yeah, while we've got you on that particular subject, alternative facts and bizarre news conferences. We're expecting the press secretary to do a news conference for a press briefing. Looking forward to watching that at 6 o'clock London time. People like Sean Spicer, reports are suggesting that somebody's already being interviewed for his job. We're told that that is fake news, hashtag. And also Kellyanne Conway, she's having all sorts of issues. She was the face of the Trump campaign for quite a lot of the time last year, during the middle of the year. Are these two people safe, or is he going to have to start detaching himself from people like that?
Well, I think it's important to have a relationship with the press. Certainly, you need to work with them and inform them and have those relationships. It seems like there are some challenges here in the early days of the administration. I think that it's going to be incumbent on President Trump to make sure that his message is able to get out and that staff don't necessarily become a distraction. So I think it's to be determined. But I also think that having the cabinet in place, people like General Mattis, General Kelly. He was able to get Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, yesterday, and I think you'll see kind of a push down to the cabinet agencies and allow them to take more of a leadership role as you have more policy and administrative type people that are able to take a role and speak to, what are the priorities for this administration going forward.
Okay. What do you think they are? What do you think they are?
Oh, what I think the priorities are? Oh,
yeah.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think absolutely. Defense is certainly a top priority. I think we saw, today there was a report of a, Russian ship off the east coast of the U.S., which isn't exactly unusual, but I think how to deal with that and manage that type of potential crisis. The North Korean crisis is certainly a priority from a national security standpoint. Repeal and replacing Obamacare and figuring out what is the appropriate measures to take so that there is coverage for the 20 million, but also bringing down costs for health care, tax reform, reinvestment in the United States, working with our allies. President Trump is heading over to meet with the Prime Minister here in the not too distant future. Cybersecurity is a big issue. I know the UK just opened a cybersecurity center earlier today, and having agreements and dealing with that challenge. It's out of the news now, but cyber is still a big challenge for the Western world, and figuring out how to protect not only our governments but also our intellectual property. And so there are many things that are top of mind, and bringing down the debt, frankly, is also another big one for this administration. $20 trillion is a pretty big number, and that affects the economy of the entire world, not just the U.S. And so thinking through those things, I think, are not something that can happen in a day, but I think that's really why he was elected in 2016, was really on economic policies and bringing jobs back to the U.S. and working through those things. So a lot to do, certainly, and distractions are things that could really take an administration off the rails, and resetting is important.
Good to talk to you. Snowballs uphill sometime. It's good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. To that end.